the Mass Rider Capital worldwide headquarters in Lubbock, Texas, this is Heights of Victory, a program showcasing businesses and leaders from across the region. You can expect to hear stories of success with bouts of adversity and resilience, which when paired with hard work and a little West Texas grit, culminate in the heights of victory. Welcome to the Heights of Victory. I'm your host, Jeff Horn, the CEO of Mass Rider Capital. And for today's episode, we have my good friend, Pete Kirsch with Blue Marlin Partners out of Washington, D.C. We're going a little outside the West Texas area today, bring in a trusted partner, one of MRC's partners that we occasionally invest in companies with, and really think a lot of Pete. Been to 3 of their conferences with Blue Marlin. They run a great organization. Pete has made it all the way down to Lubbock, Texas. And so welcome to the Heights of Victory, Pete.
Great. Thanks for having me, Jeff. Long way from Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it is. It's a little different here than D.C.
A little different.
So anyway, like I said, Mass Rider Capital started working with Blue Marlin nearly 4 years ago. They've got an excellent team of 26 professionals, almost $1 billion in assets under management and capital deployed, and they're just doing a fantastic job, and I think work with over 32 platform companies today. So, but we're going to talk a lot about Blue Marlin and the different investments and all of that here in a bit, but we always started to talking about backgrounds and all those. And so, Pete, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was born in Wisconsin, lived there for 12 years. My dad worked for the government. We moved out to the D.C. area and pretty much grew up in Northern Virginia, but was born in Milwaukee.
Yeah. And out here, you experience the 4 seasons of the year in West Texas, a lot of wind, but it's hot in the summer, and it gets cold occasionally, but like I envision Milwaukee is like, it's really cold a big part of the year.
Cold and snow, I'm that guy who walked to school in 3 feet of snow and bare feet, but no, it's summers are great in Milwaukee. They got the lakefront at Lake Michigan, and so we did get the season. But when it's cold, it's really cold.
Yeah. How big of a town a city is Milwaukee?
Population I couldn't really tell you, but I went back to Marquette there, so I really, obviously I liked Milwaukee.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the cleanest towns, good Midwestern people. So I get back there still very often to see a lot of my old friends.
Yeah. So what was it like being a young Pete Kirsch? What were you doing? What hobbies were you? Were you playing sports? Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
I'm an old guy, so back then we did a little bit of everything. When I was in Milwaukee, you had to ice skate, you had to play a little bit of hockey. Was terrible at it. Was a terrible ice skater. I remember one day my mom was curious as why I couldn't ice skate, and I was wearing 2 left ice skates for about a year and a half trying to ice skate. So that was a problem. And, but no, I grew up, I had a great family. My dad worked for the government in Northern Virginia, Joseph Califano at HEW. My mom was a nurse in the DC area at Fairfax Hospital and Arlington Hospital, and had a great childhood. Had 3 sisters, did sports, did baseball, football, basketball, did track, was pretty average at all of them. But like all of us did at that age at the time, we did a little bit of everything.
Yeah. What do you take most from your childhood, and maybe specifically like what you maybe have taken, during your life from your mother and father?
Yeah. Like I said, my dad worked for the government. He was a PR guy out of Marquette, which is one of the reasons I went back to Marquette. Other than I love their basketball uniforms. But he grinded it out. He was always trying to have a side hustle. Had a great woodworking business, had a great cabinet business. He owned a little retail store with mopeds at one time. So he had a little entrepreneur in him, but he was a government guy for most of his career. My mom, when we left Milwaukee, moved out to the Washington, D.C. area, she went back to school. She raised us and spent her spare time at night going to nursing school. So, 6 years later, a part-time nursing school and raising a family of 4, she became a nurse and loved it. And like I said, she became head nurse at 2 hospitals in the Northern Virginia area.
Yeah. I know that meant a bunch to you, her perseverance and willingness to adapt. We're going to hear a little bit about your career. There's been a lot of adapting. It sounds like your dad was an entrepreneur as well. So it sounds like you're kind of a good mix of both of them. Yeah,
it's interesting. As much as he had that steady job at the government, he always had side hustles. But there was probably, I'm a big believer that you might not know when you're growing up, but you're watching your parents. And now that I have 3 kids, I kind of look back and go, God, they were kind of paying attention every once in a while.
I hope my kids figure that out someday. It's like, Dad, maybe he's not so full of garbage.
They're paying attention. You just don't know it.
Yeah, you don't know it. Yeah. So, well, you already talked a little bit about why you went back to Marquette University, but I know that they're still important to you today. You follow them every year and all that. So tell us a little bit about your love relationship with Marquette.
Yeah, it was really cool because, my grandparents on both sides, my mom and dad, they're from Wisconsin too, so they lived there. So I went back, and my grandpa had just died. He was a cop back in the day, probably one of my heroes. I walked the beat doing prohibition, so I was really close to my grandma and grandpa. And I go back to Marquette and stay in the freshman dorm, meet a bunch of my knucklehead buddies who are still some of my closest friends today, and my grandma adopted us. So we went to Marquette, and we'd go to my grandmother's house on the weekend, and she'd make us ham salad, and she'd do our laundry. And so she became, the grandmother to my freshman dorm. So that was my memory of just getting to Marquette. I kind of had a leg up because I had family there already. So that was pretty cool. And then just a great college experience, right? Was not a very good student, it's communications major because it's an easy way to get in and out of college, hopefully. And I was a solid B-, C+ student. Lived with a bunch of journalists, and one of my roommates became a dentist, and it was just a great experience all around from my freshman year to my senior year. Yeah. And to my parents' surprise, I got out of there in 4 years.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. When you were talking to us about your grandmother, you don't know this, but like my dad's mom, my grandmother played a huge role in my life in a different way. And I could really sense how much of an impact she really did have, because you talked so fondly about that time and how much she really did for you back then.
Yeah, it was awesome. And she didn't do it just for me too. She was the grandmother to probably 8, 9, 10 of my buddies at Marquette. So yeah, when I get together with them once or twice a year at a Marquette game, there is at least 1 or 2 times where we're talking about my grandmother and what she did for us. Yeah. And get a good laugh.
Yeah, I'm sure they all have the same affinity and all that as well.
Oh yeah,
it's awesome. What made you want to go into communications, be a communications major?
That's a great question. So, and again, I guess I was paying attention. My dad, Marquette grad, journalism major, and his first job was in public relations, working for Evinrude Motors in Milwaukee. And he was a PR guy and a communications guy. And I don't know, maybe I watched a lot of Bewitched and like Darren Stevens and the whole advertising world, but that's what I liked and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to, I wanted to write. I wanted to be, a guy who promoted things. And it's interesting, when I graduated, I went back to the Washington, D.C. area and failed miserably getting a job in public relations. What I quickly learned was public relations and public affairs are 2 very different things. And public relations didn't really exist in Washington, D.C. So I fumbled away around there. But I just like promoting things, talking to people, relationship building.
Yeah. You're great at it, by the way.
I appreciate that.
Seeing a lot of the interviews you conducted and, how you handle people and all that, you can really tell that you're polished in that regard. So tell us a little bit about how you met your wife, Patty, at Marquette. Y'all been married 37 years. How'd you get introduced? Give us a little bit about the story.
I didn't meet my wife, Patty, at Marquette. I met her the first year after Marquette.
Okay.
And my wife and I tell 2 very different stories about the first or second date. But the first date, we actually met at a party, and we had a conversation. And then about a week later, we met. We literally bumped into each other in a bar. And she might write you a letter after I say this, but I asked her out on a date. And the small PR firm that I was working for, we had 4 tickets to the Neil Diamond concert. And I asked Patty to go to the Neil Diamond concert, and she went, and she thought I was a massive dork because I was going to take her to a date to the Neil Diamond concert, age 23.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact she passed up or canceled a date with a doctor to go on a date with this dork to the Neil Diamond concert.
That is a great story. So y'all get married and you get started with your professional career. And why don't you tell us about the start of your career and what you started doing?
Yeah. So again, try to get a job in PR. My first job was selling alarm systems around the Washington, D.C. Beltway. And I thought I was really good at it. What I quickly learned was the model was broken. I was making $17,000 a year and I had a $150 gas stipend. And the model for Beltway Alarm Company, the company I was working for, was to give away the alarm systems. So I was really good at giving the alarm systems away to the retail stores, and they were going to make everything up on the monitoring fees with these alarm systems. Well, that cash flow model didn't really work. And about a year later, the business was out of business and I was out of a job. I found my way to I don't even know if they still have these anymore, but a temporary personnel agency called Personnel Pool.
Yeah.
And back in the day, you would have secretaries, now administrative assistants and receptionists who, when they were on leave or on vacation or called in sick, you needed temporary help. Some of it was legal help, some of it was receptionists, et cetera. And I got a job selling temporary services. And my territory was downtown Washington, D.C. And again, I was pretty good at it. For the first couple of months, I met a lot of people and I was selling a lot of temporary services, meeting, secretaries and administrative assistants to use us to be their temporary personnel agency. One day I walked into a very small public relations and advertising firm in Washington, D.C. Very influential in my life, by the way. The guy's name was Wayne Dixon, and the woman's name was Carol Felix, and the firm was Dixon Felix. And for whatever reason, we spent a lot of time talking, we got along, and I told him I wanted to be in the PR world. And they said, well, we can't pay you, but why don't you come and spend some time and do some work for us, quote unquote, as an intern? So I did. And as it turns out, I probably spent 7 or 8 hours a day as an intern, not getting paid by Dixon and Felix. I was going into Personnel Pool in the morning, and I would fill out my call report of where I was going to visit that day. But what I would do is I would go to Dixon and Felix, and I would make my phone calls and take my orders. And I was one of the top salespeople at Personnel Pool. And that lasted a little over a year, where I was getting great experience in the PR and advertising world, not getting paid, but I was making money selling temporary services. That all ended one day. My dad had a heart attack, and the hospital called my business, Personnel Pool, and said,
"Yeah, because there's no cell phone.
There's no cell phones back then, right?"
Yeah.
So the hospital finds where I am, and they call my boss at Personnel Pool, and they say, "We need to get a hold of Pete." Well, she looks at my call list and says, "Geez, Pete's supposed to be at Sarah's office, appointment at 2:00. I'll just call Sarah." And she calls Sarah and says, "Can you have Pete, call the office when he gets there for his 2:00 appointment?" And Sarah said, "I haven't seen Pete in 7 or 8 months. He just calls me every day and I give him my order."
Yeah.
Well, the charade was over. And I went back and I got fired. And, one door closes, another one opens. Dixon and Felix found a way to hire me and pay me. And I spent 7 years there. It was an awesome experience. Created a great work ethic, press inspections at 3 a.m. We had little teeny tiny Macintoshes doing ad designs, copywriting. We grew the firm to 7, 8 people And it was a great experience. So one door closes, another one opens.
Yeah.
But I did get fired.
That is a very interesting story, and all the different things from security systems to, temporary staffing. I've actually been involved with the factoring receivables of a staffing company.
Right.
A lot of staff, I'm sure you know this, a lot of staffing companies factor their receivables because they're having to pay their temporary people weekly while they invoice those companies and get paid in 30 to 60 days. But there's a lot of that still going on today. So, well, how long did you then, you ended up staying there, and then how long did that last before moving on to the next role?
So we had found a little niche in the, DC back then it was association management, it was trade shows, conventions, it was government and tourism. There was really no business in Washington, DC. So one day I had an opportunity to go work for the American Society of Landscape Architects, which was a customer of ours. We had found a niche in association management and kind of the green industry. And I had an opportunity to go be the marketing director at the American Society of Landscape Architects. And I just gotten engaged. They were going to pay me more money. It was a real stable. And Patty thought it was a really good opportunity. It was really painful because I loved Wayne and Carol at the PR firm. I went over there, and very small organization, about $4 million in revenue. And I don't know, back then it was probably 6,000 or 7,000 members. And the whole purpose of that organization was to tell the world that landscape architects, did large scale land planning and sustainable development and wetland mitigation, stormwater management. And I fell in love with the profession, fell in love with the people. And they wanted to tell the world that they did not cut grass and mulch, but they did these other really cool large scale things. It was really hard because landscape architects didn't make a lot of money and the organization was small. After a few years into it, the CEO parted ways, and I became the CEO of the organization. And I guess that sets the stage for a lot of the things that I've done in life. I didn't read the playbook for association management. If you go back then, I knew that we needed to create some non-dues revenue to build a bigger pot of money to accomplish the mission of the organization. And like I said, these guys didn't make any money. So we ended up buying a couple companies inside of our association to produce non-dues revenue. I hired a few salespeople who made a lot more money than I did as the CEO, and our trade show took off, and our magazine advertising took off. And all of a sudden, we ended up, with a lot more members. We had a lot of non-dues revenue. We had a magazine called Garden Design that we ended up selling to a New York publisher. And all of a sudden, we had an endowment to be able to tell the world that we didn't cut grass and mulch, but we did all those other things. And when I left there in 2000, we had grown the organization to about 14,000 members from 6, and to about 12, 13 million of revenue from 4.
Yeah.
So I'm really proud of that. And I guess that if you could really look back on time, I guess I kind of was an entrepreneur, and very non-traditional, which is everything I've done in my life. Like I said, I didn't read the association management playbook, and I did it out of my gut, I think.
Yeah, and didn't really maybe know you were an entrepreneur.
I didn't
at that point in
I
time.
I would have never thought of myself as that.
Yeah. And I know this now. You probably did a lot of trade shows.
A lot of trade shows. A lot of trade shows.
Still feel those feet hurting.
A lot of them.
Yeah. So I wish they made these shoes.
I know, right?
The comfortable
no
dress
ties and comfortable shoes.
I know, man. That would have been great
20
20 years ago, working on those trade shows. But
yeah.
So then you get an opportunity to go work inside of a family office of a real successful business. Tell us that story.
Well, in between the family office and ASLA, I left the landscape architects in 2000 because I had an opportunity to go run a tech company. You got that? Landscape architecture to tech.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
And they were offering me these things that everyone was getting back then, called stock options, and I wanted some of them. And I went to run this tech company, probably a little ahead of its time, but We were using dial-up to do all the internet, so everything was really slow. And I started there in January of 2000, and 2 months later, March of 2000 rolled around, which was the big bubble bust, .com bust, and we had a business that didn't really have a future, and it was a lesson learned. And in August, I quit. We had a crappy product, to be blunt, and you only have one reputation. I couldn't run a company with a product that wasn't good enough to be in the market. I quit. I had obviously married, had 3 kids, didn't have any money. I was fortunate enough to be one of the founding advisory board members of Colin Powell's nonprofit called America's Promise. And I got to know him because at ASLA, we became a community of promise for his nonprofit. And he was a board member at AOL. Jim Kimsey, West Point grad, co-founder of AOL, had stacked the board with all his West Point buddies. And through a friend, I got introduced to Jim, and then I used Colin Powell as a reference, and pretty good reference. Probably one of the greatest men I've ever been around in my life. Yeah. And Colin ran into Jim Kimsey one day, and he said, I heard you're talking to Kirsch about running your family office. You need to hire that guy. And I got a call the next day, and I was hired. And it changed my life.
Yeah.
Jeff, back then, this is 2000.
Yeah.
Family offices weren't even around back then.
Yeah.
And Jim was chairman of the board of AOL. Steve Case was running it. Those guys got rich overnight, and Jim had an office with a lot of people doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And he needed someone to organize it. And so changed my life. That's where I went. Spent 10 years there, cut my teeth on venture capital, private equity, spent a bunch of time working on a State Department project called the International Commission on Missing Persons, spent some time in the Balkans and Iraq, and that was really, really cool and meaningful work. But the private equity and venture capital stuff is what changed my life and launched me into Blue Marlin.
I'm curious, where did you start? There wasn't a lot of family offices. There wasn't a lot of these conferences for family offices and all that. Where did you start because you had never run a family office until that point? I mean, where did you start?
No, it's funny. I tell the story. I think if it wasn't for Colin Powell recommendation, I don't know that he could have found anybody, because he was looking for somebody who had PR experience, who had nonprofit, for-profit experience, wasn't a friend, wasn't a family member, didn't work at AOL, and I think I was the only one in the Washington, D.C. area that had that resume. So where did I start? Like I said, these guys got rich really, really fast when AOL went public. And I spent the first couple of years cleaning a lot of stuff up. There were a lot of investments made. Jim was a very generous guy, both philanthropic wise and in the operating venture world. And so I learned a lot by digging in and cleaning up a lot of the investments that he had made and learning about them for the first 2 years. And then what I, again, in my non-traditional way, or I guess not having read the textbook or the playbook, I just didn't understand the traditional PE model. Got to be careful, because these PE guys make a lot of money, the traditional fund guys. But 2% fees and partnership expenses and capital calls where you don't get to pick and choose what you want to do. That I didn't quite understand it. So that kind of set the tone for the future, doing direct investing. And to be honest, that's the model for the thesis for Blue Marlin that we're running today, is direct investing with our friends and our partners and great relationships.
Yeah. So you did that for about a decade or so. And then, before we get into all the Blue Marlin and all that, you go join a landscape venture. And
in 2010, it was right after Lehman. Times were difficult. We weren't doing a lot of work in the investing side anymore. And 10 years is a long time to be at a family office at that age. And Jim was great. He helped me through the process. And it was just time for me to move on. Yep. And my very good friend, Scott Brickman, who built a very large business cutting grass and mulching called the Brickman Group. His grandpa started it. His dad took it over, and then Scott grew up in the business. He's actually a landscape architect from Penn State, and he brought in private equity and grew the business organically, did some acquisitions. And in 2010, he asked me to come help him. And so I went over and sat on his executive committee of 4 people who had built that company, and spent 3 years hopefully making an impact on the business. And in 2013, Scott sold the business to KKR for over $1 billion. So that was a time for after he sold the business, it was time for me to take my next step. I went there to work with my pal Scott. He was now moving on to better things. And I left and did some consulting for a few years, trying to figure out what was next. But I always had that itch to build a private equity model based on the thesis that I developed around the traditional private equity world, and did it.
A little bit. I don't know the exact way to put this, but traditional private equity, or the first waves of private equity that came out, seemed, I've heard you tell this story a lot, slap a little leverage on it, grow the business a little bit, expand the multiple, sell it, get somebody out 5 years. I mean, it seemed very Wall Street.
It is,
and really, with the influx of businesses transitioning and more people having capital and trying to find places to put it in other than just the public markets, Blue Marlin is very similar in what they do to Mastrider Capital, in the sense that you're trying to marry investors who've created wealth and put it to work in really good companies that are in the lower to middle market, that aren't these big, huge public companies, and bring that access to them.
Yeah, that's right. A big part of our thesis, maybe the most important part of our thesis, is we're just not going to be financial engineers, or we're just not going to provide capital. We want to bring a lot of value to the business. All of our investors are owners of Blue Marlin. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But all of them have built and been involved in very successful operating companies of all shapes and sizes in all industries. And we're not going to financial engineer anything. We want to bring value and help the founders whose businesses we're acquiring an interest in get a really nice big second bite of the apple. It's almost like bringing a mentor in, but not really calling it a mentor, just successful operators to help.
Yeah. And so you've had this over a decade now. Blue Marlin started in 2015. And I think the thing that I see as a participant is that, a lot of your investors, you're approaching 100 investors today.
Yeah.
But a lot of your deal sourcing happens within the same group.
It does.
In the industries. Talk a little bit about that.
It does. We're really fortunate. The majority of our investors are single family offices or investors who really don't want to have an office, but want an arm of direct investing or private equity, and get involved when they want to get involved. We've got investors who sell their business and they want to keep investing, but they might not want to be involved in a board role for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And all of a sudden I get a call and say, Pete, you know what? I played golf for 6 years. I can't get my handicap under 10. I think I'm going to put the band back together. And that's music to our ears. So our investor base comes from, whether it's, people who built monster optical centers, or Scott, who built a big landscape company. We actually rinsed, washed, and repeated with Scott about 4 years ago. Scott opened his playbook, had a bunch of his old Brickman guys in another landscape company, and it was a tremendous success for us. Not every deal is that easy, But when you have an opportunity to invest in, a guy like Scott's next landscape company, or not to mention any names, but who's built a big optical center, his or her next optical center, or not every deal's like that, but that's really the perfect storm for us.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes a lot of sense too. I mean, you're taking a lot of risk out by backing somebody that's done it before.
A lot.
I mean, and it's hard to do. Not everybody can do it.
Yeah, Jeff, I say this all the time. It's, there's a lot of people, very, very successful who are 1-0. There are very, very few people who are 2-0. They have a nice exit, they're 1-0, and they wake up 3 or 4 years later, then most of them are 1-5 or 1-8 or 1-10. So we like staying in our lane, our discipline with the people who've been in that same industry and doing it again.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard it put that way, but that is so true. Tell us a few of the companies that Blue Marlin has in their portfolio today as a portfolio company, and what excites you about them.
Yeah, we love the lower middle market, boring, old-fashioned, cash flowing businesses. We've got one or two that it's kind of an outlier to that thesis, but the good old-fashioned businesses that need people and crews and kind of in the industrial space. One of the businesses that I think is really interesting is a business here in Texas, Fort Worth. Business, Pipeview. We have a CEO's name's Nick Matthey, and we were fortunate enough to partner with him about 4.5 years ago. Nick had built an awesome sewer inspection business. He runs cameras through sewer lines after utilities or construction to make sure that the utility or the sewer lines the integrity has been maintained in that sewer line. And Nick had built a really nice business, up to 31, 32 crews, nice bottom line, and he was going to sell the business. It was going to be his first exit, a way to secure his family, which I think we all understand and we all get. And when he and I met, I said, Nick, sell us a percentage of your business and we'll help you get it to that next. You can take some money off the table and we'll help you get it to that next level. And we ended up doing that. And today, Nick has just done a terrific job with the help of, one or two of our partners who sit on the board and know that business pretty well. And as of this morning, he's got he's got 86 crews going right now from 31 5 years ago. And so he'll get a nice big second bite at the apple. We have a really nice investment in a 185 Dunkin' Donuts, a business that we originally passed on. It was 62 stores in Dallas, Phoenix, and Scottsdale. And one of our investors called me up and said, "Hey, why are you passing on this? I know this business really well." And he just happened to run a tech company that was doing all the loyalty programs for Dunkin' and loved the whole franchise space and loved Dunkin'. And so we took it off the pass line, and on a deal that I originally passed on, 62 stores, 70 million in revenues, now 185 stores and 240 million in revenue, all because one of my investors took the lead on it. Yeah. So really excited about the model and the portfolio that we have going right now.
Yeah. No, it sounds like I think you have 32, or you've been in 32, maybe 8 or 9 exits or something.
Yeah, we have. We just closed our 32nd business last week. Really nice fleet management business. Really excited about that company. We'll hold that for, 3, 4, 5 years, I think. And we have a great partner of ours who knows that business, chairs the board, and is going to help kind of executive chair that business into some significant growth. But we also had our 9th exit 2 weeks ago. So at a time when traditional private equity is really not exiting and providing capital back to their investors, that was our 6th exit in the last 18 months. So when we say we're going to exit, we don't have a traditional fund, so we can just exit.
Yeah, no, it's one of the great things is your investors can make a decision on which opportunities they want to invest in or not invest in but and also trying to control that exit time frame to fit your needs.
I think that's exactly the thesis that yeah.
So before we dig a little deeper and talk a little bit about a business and entrepreneurship, I want to give you the opportunity. I know you love your family.
Yeah.
You're proud of your kids. They're all quite the athletes. So, tell us about the Kirsch family.
All right, let me brag a little bit.
Yeah.
First, I have to, again, when my wife sees this, you're probably going to get a letter or an email. So I like to think that I was a pretty good athlete. My wife and my kids might argue that I graduated high school at 17. So I was the smallest kid in high school on a regular basis. I came back from college. I was 175 when I graduated my senior year of high school. I came back after my freshman year of college. I was like 220, 230. So had I stayed back, I would have been a great athlete, but I was a pretty good athlete. Kind of joke about that. My wife was a great athlete. She went to Delaware and played volleyball. She's 62 years old. She still plays volleyball at a high level today. Plays in the Senior Olympics on the volleyball team. So
wow.
She was and still is a great athlete, even as a senior. My older son, all three of my kids went to St. John's High School in Washington, D.C., part of the WCAC with the Matha and Gonzaga and Good Counsel, one of the best conferences, I think, in the country. And my older son, three-sport athlete there, and ended up going to Delaware to play baseball. My middle son ended up going to James Madison to play football. And my daughter, after her senior year at St. John's, went to Virginia Tech to swim and then transferred to JMU. So my three kids were very, very good on my tuition pocketbook.
Yeah.
And today, my older son, after he graduated, he worked for a startup for about 8 years. I teased him a lot. I said, when does a startup stop being a startup? When does it become an 8-year-old company that just loses money every year?
Yeah.
So he had a little bit of an exit, and I talked him into coming to work for Blue Marlin. And so he's been part of the team now for 3 years, which is awesome to have your kid as part of the business. And just a side story in that, I called a number of our investors and told them what I was going to do, that I wanted my son to come work at Blue Marlin. I said, what do you think? And 100% of them said, I wish I would have got one of my kids into my business. So it's been a really cool experience to have my son there. My middle son is married to an awesome young lady in Fort Worth, Texas. When he graduated from JMU, he had a cup of coffee with the Chicago Bears. When he got cut, he went to SMU and coached there for 3 years. And when Sonny left there, took him to Fort Worth to TCU. Texas Tech. He went with Sonny to TCU and has done a really, really nice job there. In the first year, they went to the national championship, and really proud of what he's doing at TCU, and even more proud because now he and Dory gave us we now have a 16-month-old grandson,
awesome.
Which is awesome. And then my daughter, after she got done swimming, she graduated during COVID. So what do you do when you graduate during COVID? You go get your master's at Georgetown. So she did that. And then her first 3 years she spent working for the Washington Nationals. And now she's working for a technology company in Washington, D.C. Okay. So real proud of all my kids.
Yeah, that's
None of them are
awesome.
on my payroll, which is really cool.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. No, that's fantastic. And I don't know if you know this, Sonny Dykes, his dad was the second all-time winningest coach here at Texas Tech, Spike Dykes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you talk about being mentors to young people. Sonny has just been an awesome part of my son's life, so it's been really cool to watch that.
That's awesome. Which gets us into the next section, digging deeper. And the first question here is mentors. Mm-hmm. Who are the people that have had the greatest influence on your life and your business career?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right when we started talking about this, I started talking about Wayne Dixon, and unfortunately Wayne passed away a couple of years ago. But I still think about that time when I was in my 20s when he gave me a chance to work for him for free, and And I still remember a lot of the things that he taught me about writing and about your customers and your clients. So I have to believe that Wayne, though I didn't know it at the time, was a massive influence on my life. And, it's one of those things, unfortunately, you don't stay in touch as much as you wish you did. So Wayne was a really important person in my life. Even before that, though, my grandpa was just the coolest guy in the world. Yeah. He was a cop who walked the beat and on the south side of Milwaukee. And, I remember he had biceps, like Rocky, even when he was 60, 65 years old. And that was really, really cool to be around him as much as I could. And then, as I grew in my professional career, it's the work for the founder of AOL for Kimsey changed my life. I met a lot of great people. I was fortunate to be, I don't want to call it the centerpiece, but like I said, all the deals came through our office. I got to meet so many awesome people in the DC community, whether they're, our office is right across from the White House. So some of the politicians, all of the great entrepreneurs that came out of AOL, who I still consider friends today. So that was really, really impactful to sit and watch and be around a lot of those people at a very influential time in my life.
Yeah. Have the roles reversed? Are you mentoring people today in your role as CEO of Blue Marlin, and how's it been to flip the sides of the table?
Yeah. Jeff, I like to think I am. We built a really awesome culture at Blue Marlin. We've got a very young team. Culture is about, making sure you're happy when you come to the office. Make sure you never miss your kid's soccer game, which Jim was really, really good about when I was in his office. So I like to think that I am mentoring and providing a good environment for people to learn and create a culture that is enjoyable and profitable and down the road. Again, I'd like to think they're paying attention. We started with the kids. Your kids are paying attention. You just know it until they leave.
No, that's right. Yeah, no. I think one of the things that's the neatest about your story, and you've been so forthcoming about, sharing, is like what you set out to do and what you ended up doing, are vastly different. And so looking back on that, what advice would you give to young professionals? Because there's a lot of kids graduating from college, maybe not going to college. They enter the business world. They think they know what they're going to do. What's your advice to them after going through that? I never thought that Blue Marlin would be where it is today. When I launched it, if Jeff, if you would have said, 10 years later, Pete, you're going to have $100 million of capital deployed and you're going to have 5 deals and 2 exits, I probably would have said that's a great result. And we were flexible enough to kind of roll with how the business was growing and listen to our investors who wanted to continue to build the model. And that's resulted in, I think, a really successful platform for Blue Marlin. So I say that because I think, it's easy to, the easy button is not to take any risk. And I had a lot of sleepless nights building Blue Marlin, but no risk, no reward. I don't know that I have any advice for the young people today getting a job other than chase your dream. I do have counsel to some people about how liberating it is to have your own business. There's a lot of young entrepreneurs today who are chasing their dreams and a lot more successful than I'll ever be. So don't think you can't do anything. Do something, take a shot at doing it. Timing's everything too. I could have never done this when I was raising the children. And so when my nest got empty, it was when I took a shot. And I think there's a lot of young people taking a shot before their nest gets full. Yeah.
And take an opportunity. So that's the only advice I give.
Yeah. We've had an opportunity here at Mass Rider to work with the Rawls College of Business at Texas Tech and some of their students, and they come through. And one of the questions they often ask is like, when is the right time to take that risk?
Yeah.
Well, and we always tell them, like, it just depends. It depends
Does.
on what your tolerance for risk is. When you're younger, you make a mistake or take a misstep, you can recover a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but it also takes capital. So you might need to be a little bit older. But when you're older, you're now more into your marriage. You most likely have children. You've got other things going on. I mean, like, there's probably not just the perfect time to take a risk. It just is when you're ready.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%. I always dreamed of having my own business, and never could pull the trigger because I never had that risk tolerance to maybe go on a couple of weeks or a month without a paycheck. I mean, when I started Blue Marlin, I went a long time without a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I had the risk tolerance to do it because I was an empty nester. So I think that advice of when's the right time, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. In looking at all of these opportunities that you've invested in and people that you've partnered with and this big investor network that you've created at Blue Marlin, there's a lot of entrepreneurs in there.
Mm-hmm.
What is a common fabric that a lot of them have that you have seen and found?
It's a common denominator with all these investors. Drive. I think it's absolute drive and the ability, to our earlier point, to take some risk. There's a few of them who I wouldn't say inherited, but took a family business to a whole nother level. And I think that's just as exciting as starting your own business, But I think the ability to, see around the corner a little bit, where the opportunities lie and taking advantage of it. I could list a whole bunch of our investors, the Tiffany Masterson story on Drunk Elephant is fantastic. She built a all organic skincare business out of a trip to Africa, where she decided that this product there, this plant there, was going to be a good basis for her business and the skincare and cosmetic business that she grew into a monster company. And it was because she took an opportunity and saw around a corner. And so I think that's probably the common thread amongst all of our investors.
Yeah. What challenges have you encountered in your professional career? What's been maybe one of the biggest one or two challenges and how'd you overcome that?
Yeah. Not going without a paycheck for a year and a half was pretty good challenge. Ask my wife about that. You got to grind through it, live within your means. I tell you, one of the really interesting and fun conversations that Jim used to have with young people who'd come into our office, they say, "Mr. Kimsey, what's the most important thing in business?" And he asked, "What were the challenges that you faced?" And he said, "Well, challenges were never having enough money to do what you wanted to do and build your business. So my advice to you is make sure you always have more money coming in than going out." And these young people would look at him thinking this great sage advice. And I would go, "It's pretty good advice. Make sure you have more money coming in than going out." But I think having the resources to build your business, and then also having the insight to go, okay, we still have to live within our means and our business, so we can't grow that fast. So those were some of the challenges that I had at Blue Marlin. And one of the things that one of my investors told me when I was building Blue Marlin is, and I'll never forget it, when you have capital, hire good people. When you have capital to build your business, your focus should be hiring great people to help you build the business. And I'll never forget that. And that's the one thing that I live by. When we have capital, let's make sure we hire great people.
Totally agree with that. At Mass Rider Capital, we talk a lot about, my experience, Brooks' experience, Dusty's experience in operating companies
Right.
before we became an investment firm or family office. And I think I would say that your foray into running the landscape association and then running the family office, really it provides a unique perspective for an investor, because I think you're able as an investor with the operational background to be able to spot potential challenges, because like as an operator, that's what you deal with every day. Is like, you're like, where are my blind spots? What are the problems coming that I can't see? And then when problems do occur, how do I fix them?
Right.
I mean, would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with it. And I think it's interesting the diversity of experience that I had, whether it was with the association, a nonprofit, or in Jim's office. By the way, running his office was also a job, right?
Yeah.
So just not the companies or the portfolio companies or the philanthropic work we're involved with the State Department, but you're also running the office. And so you take all those experiences, and I think that develops into some really, really good strategies that can be, I think, that you can lay across a number of different businesses in our portfolio.
Well, appreciate all the sage advice and the conversation. We have one more section to go. It's called the Around the Horn. Are you ready?
Shoot, I'm ready.
Right, so I'm gonna come out
I'm
here.
ready.
You haven't seen any of these, so we'll get started. But all right, who is your favorite Marquette athlete of all time?
Dwayne Wade.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he was awesome.
Absolutely.
Great guy.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. What sports teams do you follow?
Follow the Green Bay Packers.
Okay.
Washington Capitals, huge Washington Capitals fan, season ticket holder. And I have to say on the baseball side, Milwaukee Brewers and the Washington Nationals, because when I was in Kimsey's office, we were responsible for getting the Washington Nationals to Washington from Montreal.
Okay.
So I have a soft spot for the Nationals.
You know, it's really neat when we go up north, there's I'll see if you agree, there's a big affinity for pro sports teams.
Right.
And down south, it seems to be generally more towards the college teams. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Marquette didn't have a football team. So wherever my son's coaching is who I really, really root for.
So now you're a Horn Frog.
I'm a huge Horn
So
Frog.
you'll be here the Saturday after Thanksgiving for the game.
Yep.
Awesome. AI, where are we headed with AI?
Boy, if I knew exactly where we were headed, I'd be there. We actually, this can be a little longer than Around the Horn answer, Jeff. I mean, you were there 2 years ago when we had Joel Leonoff and Karen Ann Terrell talk about what's going on in the applied AI world, right? Vertically integrated technologies, not the large language models. And this might be a little plug. You know, Karen Ann, is CIO or at Walmart and Chrysler and Baxter. She's on a number of public boards. She's involved with Google in a number of areas. And Joel Leonoff built a couple of large payment management systems. When they led us through that conversation, a number of our investors said, P, why are we not following Karen Ann and Joel into these applied AI technologies? Why are we not investing there? And I simply said, because I'm too old for early stage. I would like boring, old-fashioned cash flowing businesses. And the next day they said, Peter, Blue Marlin doesn't do this. We're going to go talk to him and do it ourselves. So Karen Ann came on as our managing director, and we are investing in revenue-producing applied AI technologies that are integrated into an industry. And I'll just use PipeView as an example. There's a bunch of AI now plugged into our cameras. So we're getting a glimpse into what a technology might be really useful in the sewer business. So we've already made 2 investments in that early stage following Joel and Karen Ann's lead through our accelerator fund, a company called EtherMed and a company called In the White Space. So we focus on the industries where there's an AI technology in a healthcare or a landscape or a sewer or a vertically integrated industry. That's where we are focused right now. Yeah. And where is it going? I don't know, but I'll tell you, we're lucky. If I could give young people any advice right now, it's, man, the technology world is tough, and being in the industrial world, electricians, plumbing, learn to own a plumbing business, learn to own the
Yeah.
electrical company, learn to own an HVAC business, because those guys are doing extremely well right now.
Yeah.
Because AI is not going to take their work away.
We were at a conference. I was at a conference recently, and they were talking about AI. Certainly, every business is going to be addressing how they use AI in their business to improve their efficiencies, bottom lines, all that. But heavy tangible asset companies versus intangible asset companies right now, as the growth moves ahead, the tangible side, I heard you say it earlier with an industrial investment, all those seem to be the place to be until AI settles more into mainstream, and stuff like that. So,
I have to believe we're going to see the acceptance or rebirth of the VOTech schools, right? I mean, they were there when I was growing up, and they've kind of disappeared.
Yeah, I agree with that. You get a big win. How do you celebrate?
Oh, how do I celebrate? I go fishing.
Yeah.
I take some time off and I go fishing.
No,
that's exactly how I celebrate.
Well, all right. Well, speaking of fishing,
Miller Lite and I go fishing.
Okay, well, that's what we're looking for here. Miller Lite and fishing. So, where's your top fishing spot, and what are you fishing for?
So, my top fishing spot is Site 11 off the coast of Delaware. Okay. So we have a small little beach house in Lewis, Delaware. We go fishing in Delaware Bay. We go fishing on the surf. But my favorite spot is Site 11. We get flounder, we get sea bass. And this weekend, I'm actually going in fishing in a tuna tournament.
Oh, awesome.
So that's how I celebrate. I don't golf very well, so I fish and I do that pretty well.
That is awesome. Do you enjoy buying a company or selling a company more?
Well, I think the logical answer is selling it, because you put money in everybody's pocket. Your investors are happy. You're celebrating a success over a period of time, because not every business comes to a successful exit, and you make your team really, really happy. So I think absolutely selling, but I also really, really like the in between time. I like helping the journey. Yeah. It's like anything, you win a championship. What's next? Well, you got to wait till next year. So the journey's fun. Yeah.
Your favorite vacation spot? Is that a fishing spot?
My favorite, our family started going to Captiva about 5 years ago, and that's become a really cool destination for the family. A little bit of everything there for us.
Yeah. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what's your first impression of West Texas?
Dry, hot, flat. And there's a lot of awesome resources here in Lubbock, in West Texas. We have an office in Dallas. My son's in Fort Worth. And if I found Texas, anywhere in Texas, with maybe a few exceptions, and this is not one of them, I would probably never left Texas.
Yeah.
I love everything. I love the people here, the most friendly people. They share they're everything about Texas. I love Lubbock, Fort Worth, Dallas, maybe a few places I won't mention that I'm not real fond of, but I would have never left Texas if I'd found it in my 20s.
Yeah. No, well, Pete, Texas loves you, and we appreciate you being here. Thank you for making the time to come down and visit with us on the Heights of Victory. It's really impressive what you've built with Blue Marlin, and we're very happy to be a partner of Blue Marlin's and a participant in your business. And so thank you very much for coming down.
Jeff, you and Dusty and your whole team have just been awesome partners for us. I mean, we couldn't go to Central Casting and find a better partner than you guys here at Master Rider. So we appreciate you guys as well.
Well, thank you, Pete. That wraps it for this episode. Thank you for joining us, and please subscribe to our channel. And if you have a comment, please email us at heightsofvictory@massrider.com. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Heights of Victory.